Okay, we're back here for part 2 of the 390. I realized last night editing the part 1 video, I goofed. I forgot a part of putting the saw back together. So we're going to try to sneak the carb plate in. Might have to unbolt the cylinder and kind of start from square one. I don't want to, just because if I tear that gasket, I have to reorder it and they're on back order. So this carb plate is what I forgot. It sets here under your intake. So we're going to attempt to sneak it in. Our other option would be to remove the intake boot and from the cylinder and try to, and then put it in and then put the intake boot back in. But I really don't want to do that either because it is already set and sealed and I don't want to try to reseal it. But I don't think I'm going to get lucky and sneak this in here without tearing something. So, unbolting the cylinder it is, which the gasket should come right up with the cylinder. It hasn't had heat to it. We're just going to backtrack here real quick, loosen this up, and okay, so I'm going to loosen these cylinder bolts. Again, don't forget diagonal. Okay, so loosening cylinder bolts to allow us to pick the cylinder up to get that carb plate back in there because, yep, definitely, it's every time I do these, every single time I forget that part. Because I'm like so focused on getting the cylinder put on and getting the case closed up so no dirt's getting into it that, yeah, I forget it every time. I need to put a sticky note right here. Don't forget the carb plate. Gives us enough play to set that down in there. Nope. And you know what else I forgot? The impulse line. So this has to connect to the case as well. Boy, I'm just showing you guys all the wrong things to do with this. So this goes through your carb plate like so. The hole there slides through. And there is a port or line coming off the cylinder that it's going to attach to. Come on, saw, cooperate here with us. So I feel like the whole 17-minute video that I'm posting for part 1, it was a waste of time, right? But hey, you get to see me torque down a cylinder again. All right. This really does not want to. There we go. Okay. So we are in. We have to put our line on here. I'm sorry I can't show you exactly what I'm doing. There's just not enough of me, not enough hands. But I'll show you on the old one where I'm talking where it connects to. Okay, success. Right. So we are going to tighten these back down. And get my torque wrench back out here. And we're gonna cross our fingers that when we go to pressure check this, we're all good. Because in that case, I've had it happen before where I've had to literally pull all of this back apart and had to put more of that gasket maker on it to seal it back up. And that'll just make for a really long video that you guys can like just throw a laughy face at. It's like, ha, you knew better. You've done it every time. Which, yes, I fully admit, I've done it every single time I've forgotten this curb plate. So, if you remember, it is 8 to 10 Newton meters. We're going to go with 9. And keep it with our diagonal. And take care of this because, well, it's expensive and I don't want to break it. You can see me try on video. Alright, so we are going to bolt down. And this is what I mean about putting the bolts back into your old saw. You see I have the plate bolts here. So we're going to pop those out. And this is the port here I was talking about that I was getting that line slid onto. Most everything on this saw is either a 4 or 5 millimeter Allen. It's some of the parts kind of cross-reference later on into like a T20, 25, 27 torque. So when you come to your starter recoil, if you have to replace a bolt, you might end up having 3 Allens, 1 torque. It just comes down to what supplier that they're getting their parts from at the time of what part you get. Okay, so now we have this tightened down. We are going to actually do our pressure back test on this. So we need our cylinder plug. So this is testing the cylinder gasket, the seals that Husky put into the case itself, the case integrity itself around that crankcase gasket. And then it's also checking around this line that we just installed to make sure that's not leaking, and then also our intake boot to make sure that is not leaking. I have so many different plates in here, I forget what goes where when there's such a minute difference in the sizing. So like I've said in the past, I try to just reuse, like for the muffler plate, for the exhaust plate, I'll just reuse the muffler bolts. I do have to use a different set of bolts for the intake, just because obviously the ones that go with the carburetor are super long, and we're not putting the carburetor back on, which is actually something you can do. You can get just one of the, not this one, one of these wedges, and just put it right behind your carburetor and use that as your plate. Okay, so the exhaust side is 5mm bolts, Allen's. So I'm going to tighten that one down. My information on videos will get better once I figure out a camera that I can somehow control. Okay, so that is the exhaust port being plated off. And then we have those aren't the right ones. All right, well, hold that thought while I go find the right bolts for the intake. Well, it's a couple days later and I'm finally getting back to this. So where we left off is I was trying to find the bolts to put the plate on for the intake. I couldn't find it. So like I had said, what you can do is just use this wedge and the carburetor, which is what we're going to actually do for this one. So it's pretty simple. Just use your bolts and you get the carburetor started onto the intake. And then you're just going to slide the wedge down through. And cross your fingers and hope that you get it seated the first time and you're not fighting for 10 minutes to get a seal on this side. That's why I like the plates. It's easier to see if you have a seal or not when you're spraying the soapy water down through it. Actually, we're gonna have to throw, I didn't think this through. I'll tell you what, you ever have those weeks where it's just, your brain is just tired? I'm having one of those weeks. We actually have to have the air filter holder on this as well. To take up the extra slack of the bolts. So we're gonna try that again. So what I'm doing is I'm actually hooking that air filter holder back in where it needs to be so that we don't get this at an angle and end up tearing something. All right, so we are going to cross our fingers, cross our toes. And hope we have a good seal on this side.